My nephew thought I was too old to notice what he was doing. He thought my gray hair meant I was slowing down, that my talk of retirement meant I was losing my edge. He was wrong about all of that. Dead wrong. I'm 62 years old. I've been a homicide detective with the Los Angeles Police Department for 28 years. I've interrogated serial killers, drug lords, and con artists who could sell ice to Eskimos. I can spot a lie before the words finish leaving someone's mouth. I can read body language the way most people read street signs. My nephew Marcus grew up watching me solve murder cases, but somehow he thought I wouldn't notice him stealing from me. Let me back up. I need to explain how we got here, because this isn't just a story about theft. It's about betrayal at a level I never imagined possible. It's about the moment you realize that the child you helped raise, the boy you considered almost like your own son, sees you as nothing more than a mark. Marcus is 31 now. He's my brother David's kid. David died in a car accident when Marcus was 10 years old. Drunk driver ran a red light and killed him instantly. My sister-in-law Rachel fell apart after that. She tried her best, but she was drowning in grief and medical bills and everything else that comes with sudden loss. So I stepped in. I helped raise Marcus. I taught him to throw a baseball. I helped him with his homework. I paid for his college education. He called me Uncle Jim growing up, but sometimes, when it was just us, he'd slip and call me Dad. I never corrected him. Marcus wasn't a bad kid. He was actually pretty smart, got decent grades, had friends, but he never quite found his footing as an adult. He bounced from job to job, always had some scheme or business idea that never quite worked out. Always had money problems. I helped him out more times than I can count. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. I figured that's what family does. About 4 years ago, I started investing in rental properties. It wasn't anything fancy. I'd worked 2 jobs for years, lived below my means, saved everything I could. I bought a small duplex in Van Nuys first, then a single-family home in Reseda, then another duplex in North Hollywood, and finally, a 4-unit building in Burbank. Nothing glamorous, just working-class neighborhoods, decent properties that I could rent out to decent people. I managed them myself for the first 3 years. I enjoyed it, honestly. It gave me something to do outside of work, something that didn't involve death and violence and all the darkness I deal with on the job. But it was time-consuming, collecting rent, handling repairs, dealing with tenant issues. And I was starting to think about retirement, not because I'm slowing down, but because after 28 years of seeing the worst of humanity, I was ready for something different. That's when Marcus made his pitch. It was about 8 months ago. He came over to my house, brought his wife Shayla. I liked Shayla well enough when they first got married 2 years ago. She was quiet, seemed nice, worked as a dental hygienist. Marcus told me he'd been thinking about his career, about building something real. He wanted to get into property management. "Uncle Jim," he said, sitting in my living room, "I know you've been talking about retirement. I've been watching what you do with those rental properties, and I think I could really help you out. Let me take over managing them. You've taught me so much over the years. Let me give back. You deserve to relax." I'll admit, it sounded good. I was tired. The job was getting harder, the properties were work, and the idea of letting family help out appealed to me. Marcus seemed genuinely enthusiastic. He'd done research, printed out articles about property management, even put together a basic business plan. Shayla smiled and nodded along, talking about how this could be Marcus's chance to finally build something stable, so I agreed. We drew up a simple contract. Marcus would collect rent, coordinate repairs, handle tenant communications. He'd take 15% of the rental income as his fee. I'd still own everything, still make the major decisions, but he'd handle the day-to-day. It seemed like a win-win. For the first few months, everything seemed fine. Marcus sent me regular updates, the rent checks came through on time, tenants seemed happy. I'll be honest, I didn't scrutinize things too carefully. I trusted him. He was family. He was the kid I'd helped raise. Why would I suspect anything? The first sign something was wrong came about 4 months in. I got a call from one of my long-term tenants, Mrs. Rodriguez. She'd been renting the ground floor unit of my Burbank building for 6 years. Sweet lady, retired teacher, never late on rent, never complained about anything. "Mr. Harrison," she said when I answered, and she sounded confused. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I didn't know who else to call. The heater in my unit stopped working 2 days ago, and I've been calling Marcus, but he's not responding. I know you're in the nursing home now, but I didn't know if maybe you had another number for him, or—" I stopped her right there. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm not in a nursing home. I don't know where you got that idea." There was a long pause on the line. "Oh, Marcus told me you'd moved into assisted living. He said you were having some health problems, and that's why he took over managing the properties." "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to disturb you. I just thought—" "You're not disturbing me at all," I said, and my mind was already working, already turning over this new information. "I'll have someone out there to fix your heater this afternoon. And Mrs. Rodriguez, has anything else seemed strange to you lately?" Another pause. Then, hesitantly, "Well, Marcus did ask me to start paying rent in cash instead of with checks. He said it was easier for bookkeeping. I hope that's okay?" I kept my voice calm, neutral. Years of interrogations have taught me how to hide my reactions. "That's fine, Mrs. Rodriguez. Don't worry about anything. I'll take care of the heater." After I hung up, I sat there for a long moment. My mind was racing, but I didn't jump to conclusions. Not yet. I'm a detective. I deal in evidence, not assumptions. But I also know that when small inconsistencies appear, they're usually symptoms of something larger. Why would Marcus tell my tenants I was in a nursing home? Why ask for cash instead of checks? These weren't random mistakes. These were choices. Deliberate choices. I started digging. First, I called my other tenants. Made up an excuse about doing a routine check-in, asking if everything was okay with the properties and with Marcus's management. 2 of them mentioned they were now paying cash. One of them, a young couple in the Reseda house, said Marcus had told them I'd passed away and he'd inherited the property. Another tenant, in the Van Nuys duplex, said Marcus told him I had dementia and didn't remember the properties anymore. Different lies for different people, but all serving the same purpose, making me seem absent, incompetent, or dead, making himself seem like the rightful owner or sole authority. I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just sloppy management. This was systematic deception. Next, I checked my bank accounts. The rent checks from the tenants who still paid that way were still coming in, but I noticed the amounts were slightly lower than they should be. Marcus's 15% fee, sure, but also other deductions marked as repairs or maintenance that I'd never authorized and had no documentation for. Then I did something I'd been trained to do for nearly 3 decades. I started surveillance. I created a fake email address and browsed Airbnb listings in my property's zip codes, and there they were. All 4 of my properties listed under a business name I didn't recognize. Premium LA Rentals, LLC. The listings were good, I'll give them that. Professional photos, well-written descriptions, competitive prices. My Burbank 4-unit building, which I rented long-term for about $8,000 a month total, was being rented out as 4 separate Airbnb units for $200 a night each. Do the math on that. Even at 70% occupancy, that's over $17,000 a month, none of which was coming to me. I sat at my computer, staring at these listings, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger, exactly. Not yet. More like the cold, focused calm that comes over me when I'm working a homicide case and all the pieces suddenly click together. This wasn't just theft. This was fraud. Identity theft, probably. Forgery, definitely. And it was being committed by someone I'd loved like a son. I needed to know how deep this went. So I did what any good detective would do. I went undercover. I created a fake profile with a fake name and a burner phone number. I booked a 3-night stay at my own property, the Van Nuys duplex. I paid through the app, using a prepaid credit card. The whole time I was doing this, part of me kept hoping I'd find some innocent explanation. Maybe Marcus had mentioned this to me and I'd forgotten. Maybe there was some paperwork I'd signed that I didn't remember. Maybe I was wrong, but I knew I wasn't wrong. The day of my check-in, I showed up at the duplex at the appointed time. Marcus was there, waiting outside with a key. He was smiling, playing the part of the friendly host. He didn't recognize me at first because I was wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, dressed in jeans and a hoodie instead of my usual slacks and button-down. I'd let my gray beard grow out for the past few weeks. I looked like a tourist, not a cop, not his uncle. "Hey there," Marcus called out as I walked up. "You must be Mike. Welcome to LA." I nodded, kept my voice slightly different, a little rougher. "Thanks. Nice place you got here." "Yeah, we pride ourselves on quality," Marcus said, unlocking the door. "This is actually one of several properties we manage. Family business, you know." Family business. I almost laughed at that. He gave me the full tour, pointing out the amenities, the Wi-Fi password, the local restaurant recommendations. He was good at this, I realized. Charismatic, confident. He'd clearly done this many times before. As we walked through the unit, I was mentally cataloging everything. This was the ground floor unit that a nice young family, the Johnsons, had been renting from me for 2 years. Where were they now? Had Marcus evicted them? Paid them off? Lied to them too? "So you own all these properties?" I asked casually, playing dumb. Marcus hesitated for just a fraction of a second. I caught it. "Well, my business partner and I own them. We've been building a portfolio over the last few years. Real estate's a great investment if you know what you're doing." "Your business partner," I repeated. "They involved in the day-to-day operations too?" Another micro-expression, a slight tightening around his eyes. He's more of a silent partner. Elderly guy, not really involved anymore. To be honest, he's having some health issues, so I handle pretty much everything now. There it was. He was talking about me. I was the silent partner with health issues. I wanted to drop the act right there. Wanted to grab him by the collar and demand to know what the hell he thought he was doing. But I didn't. Because I'm a detective, and I know that catching someone in the act is different from catching them in the planning stages. I needed documentation. I needed to see the full scope of this operation. I needed evidence that would hold up in court. So I thanked him, told him the place looked great, and waited for him to leave. Then I spent the next 3 days documenting everything. I photographed the entire unit, checked the locks, looked for any modifications he'd made. I didn't find much in the duplex itself, but what I did find was telling. A whole file folder of business cards and promotional materials for Premium LA Rentals LLC, all listing Marcus as the CEO and primary contact. While I was doing this, I ran a corporate record search. Premium LA Rentals LLC had been registered 8 months ago, right around the time Marcus had approached me about property management. The registered agent was Marcus Harrison. The business address was a UPS store mailbox. And according to the filing documents, the LLC owned 4 properties in the Los Angeles area. My properties. He'd created a shell company and was essentially pretending to own my rental properties. He was collecting rent from my long-term tenants in cash, pocketing it, then renting those same properties on Airbnb for even more money. It was elegant, in a criminal sort of way, diversified income streams. And all of it off my books, out of my sight. But I still didn't know if Shayla was involved or how far this really went. So I kept watching. Over the next few weeks, I conducted what amounted to a full investigation. I pulled property records for all 4 of my properties and discovered something that made my blood run cold. Someone had filed a quitclaim deed on my Reseda property 3 months ago, transferring ownership from me to Premium LA Rentals LLC. The signature on the deed was supposed to be mine. It wasn't even a good forgery. The slant was wrong, the pressure points were inconsistent, and I don't make my capital J's like that. I've signed thousands of documents in my life. I know my own signature. Marcus had forged my name on a legal document to steal my property. That's not just theft. That's multiple felonies. Forgery, fraud, grand larceny, and if he'd done it once, he'd probably try to do it again with the other properties. I needed to know the end game here. What was his ultimate plan? Was he going to slowly transfer all my properties into his LLC? Was he planning to wait until I actually did retire or get sick, then claim I'd given him everything? Was he just going to bleed me dry and disappear? So I did something I'd done 100 times in interrogations. I gave him enough rope to hang himself. I started playing my part. I called Marcus, sounding tired and confused. I mentioned that I was having trouble remembering things, that I'd gone to the doctor, and they were running some tests. I asked him if he could handle the properties completely for a while, told him I trusted him to make all the decisions. I could hear the relief in his voice. Of course, Uncle Jim. You just focus on your health. I've got everything under control. And he ran with it. Over the next month, I watched him get bolder. He filed quit-claim deeds on the other 3 properties, all with forged signatures. He took out a home equity line of credit on the Burbank building, again with forged documents. $50,000 deposited into the premium LA Rentals account. He also started building what I can only call a case file against me. I know this because I hacked into his email. Yes, it's probably not admissible in court, but I wasn't planning to use any of this in court directly. I just needed to know what I was dealing with. Marcus had been collecting evidence of my supposed mental decline. He'd been recording our phone conversations, editing them to make me sound confused or forgetful. He'd taken photos of my house when it was messy, making it look like I couldn't take care of myself. He'd even drafted emails to Adult Protective Services, though he hadn't sent them yet. The plan, from what I could piece together, was to have me declared mentally incompetent. He'd position himself as my concerned nephew, the responsible family member stepping in to help. He'd get power of attorney, and then everything would become his, legally. Reading those emails, seeing how carefully he'd planned this, I had to step away from my computer. I went outside and just stood in my backyard for a long time, trying to process what I was feeling. This wasn't some impulsive crime. This wasn't Marcus getting desperate and making a bad decision. This was calculated, methodical, long-term planning. This was predatory, and it was directed at me, someone who'd been more of a father to him than his biological father had the chance to be. But I'm a detective. I've learned to compartmentalize. So I pushed the emotion aside and focused on what I do best, building a case. I documented everything. Every forged signature, every fraudulent property transfer, every Airbnb transaction, every dollar that flowed into premium LA Rentals that should have flowed to me. I created a timeline, gathered witnesses, collected physical evidence. I even reached out to a few other detectives I trusted, people outside my immediate precinct, and ran the case by them. Not officially, just as a hypothetical. They confirmed what I already knew. This was prosecutable. This was serious prison time. The hardest part was involving other law enforcement. See, I couldn't be the arresting officer. I couldn't even be officially involved in the investigation. Too much conflict of interest. Too many ways a defense attorney could claim bias or improper procedure. So I had to bring in the feds. I contacted a special agent I'd worked with on a few joint task forces, a woman named Sarah Chen. She's sharp, thorough, and she doesn't cut corners. I laid out the entire case for her, handed over all my documentation. She took one look at it and whistled. "Jim," she said, "this is one of the most complete case files I've ever seen for a fraud case. You've basically done our job for us." "That's the idea," I said. She looked at me carefully. "You know what's going to happen here, right? You know where this ends?" "I know. This is your nephew. Your brother's kid." "I know," I said again. She nodded slowly. "Okay, let's do this right." The FBI opened an official investigation. They subpoenaed records from the county recorder's office, from Airbnb, from Marcus's bank accounts. They interviewed my tenants. They brought in handwriting analysts to confirm the forgeries. And through all of this, Marcus had no idea. He thought he was in the clear. He thought I was too out of it to notice, and too trusting to suspect. The plan was to let him make one more move. One final act that would cement the case beyond any reasonable doubt. Agent Chen wanted to catch him in the act of trying to sell one of the properties, using the fraudulent deeds. So I gave him the opportunity. I called Marcus and told him I'd been thinking about downsizing, maybe selling a couple of the properties. I played it confused, said I couldn't remember which properties I still owned, asked him to help me figure it all out. He jumped on it. "Uncle Jim, I've been thinking the same thing. You know what? I actually have a buyer interested in the Rosita house. Good offer, too. Want me to handle the paperwork? You just have to sign a few things and I'll take care of the rest. That sounds good, Marcus. Thank you for helping me with this. That's what family's for, he said. Family. That word kept coming up, and every time he said it, it felt like a knife. Marcus scheduled a closing for 2 weeks out. He lined up a buyer. Someone I later learned was a friend of his who was in on the scheme. The plan was to sell the property, split the proceeds, and use my supposed confusion as cover if anyone ever questioned it. By the time I figured out what happened, if I ever did, it would be too late. What Marcus didn't know was that the FBI was watching his every move. They'd tapped his phones, monitored his emails, followed his movements. Agent Chen even had an undercover agent pose as the escrow officer. The day of the closing, I showed up. Marcus hadn't expected that. He'd told me the wrong time, hoping I'd be confused and wouldn't attend. But I walked into that escrow office at the real closing time, and I watched his face go pale. "Uncle Jim?" he stammered. "I thought I told you 2 o'clock. It's only noon." "No, you told me noon," I said calmly. I wrote it down. Shayla was there too, sitting next to Marcus. She looked nervous, kept glancing at him. The buyer was there, looking uncomfortable. And then Agent Chen walked in, along with 2 other agents and a Los Angeles police detective I'd never met before, which was intentional. They wanted someone with no connection to me handling the arrest. "Marcus Harrison?" Agent Chen said, showing her credentials. "I'm Special Agent Sarah Chen with the FBI. We need to talk to you about some irregularities regarding these properties." I watched Marcus's face cycle through emotions: confusion, fear, calculation, and finally, desperation. He looked at me, and for just a moment, I saw the little boy who used to call me Dad, Uncle Jim. "I don't know what this is about. Tell them we have an arrangement, that you wanted me to handle your properties." "That's not exactly true, is it, Marcus?" I said quietly. Agent Chen spread documents across the table. Forged deeds, bank statements, Airbnb records, Marcus's emails about having me declared incompetent. It was all there, irrefutable. "Marcus Harrison," she said, "you're under arrest for wire fraud, forgery, identity theft, and grand larceny. You have the right to remain silent." Shayla started crying. Marcus just sat there, staring at the table, as they read him his rights. The buyer turned out to be an undercover agent too, and he started asking Marcus questions, trying to get him to talk. Marcus did, actually. He tried to explain it away, said he was just trying to help me, that I was confused and he was protecting my assets. But the evidence was too strong. Every excuse he made just dug him deeper. They arrested Shayla too, though she immediately started cooperating. She claimed Marcus had told her I'd agreed to everything, that she didn't know about the forgeries. The evidence suggested otherwise, but the prosecutor offered her a deal for testimony against Marcus. The trial took 8 months. Marcus pleaded not guilty, which meant going through the whole process. I had to testify. I had to sit on that stand and walk through how I'd discovered the fraud, how I'd investigated it, how I'd felt when I realized what my nephew was doing. The defense tried to paint me as a confused old man who'd misunderstood a legitimate business arrangement. They brought in their own handwriting experts to question the forgery claims. They tried to make it seem like Marcus had my verbal permission for everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury took 4 hours to find him guilty on all counts. Marcus got 7 years in federal prison. Shayla got 18 months in probation, plus she had to pay restitution. Marcus is in FCI Victorville now. He'll be eligible for parole in 5 years, but given his behavior in prison so far, refusing programs, still claiming innocence, I don't think he'll get it. I got my properties back. I got the money they'd stolen, plus some of their personal assets that were seized. I sold the Rosita house because I couldn't look at it anymore without thinking about that forged deed. The other 3 properties I still own, but I manage them myself now. I don't trust anyone else with them. The hardest part wasn't the investigation or the trial. It was the aftermath. Marcus's mother, my sister-in-law Rachel, stopped speaking to me. She said I destroyed her son's life over a misunderstanding. Some other family members took her side. I lost about half my extended family over this. But here's what I told Rachel, and what I'd tell anyone else who thinks I was wrong. I spent 28 years putting criminals in prison. I've arrested murderers, rapists, drug dealers, people who've done unspeakable things. I took an oath to uphold the law, not selectively enforce it based on who breaks it. If I had let Marcus get away with this, what would that make me? What kind of detective would I be if I only cared about justice when it was convenient? More than that, though, I thought about what would have happened if I'd done nothing. Marcus would have stolen everything I'd worked for my entire life. And then what? Would he have stopped there? Or would he have moved on to someone else? Some other elderly person who trusted him? My job isn't just to solve crimes after they happen. It's to protect people from becoming victims in the first place. I've had a lot of time to think about where things went wrong with Marcus. Was it losing his father so young? Was it something I did or didn't do when I was helping raise him? Was there a moment where I could have seen this coming and intervened? I don't have good answers to those questions. I've interrogated enough criminals to know that people make choices. Marcus chose to lie to me. He chose to forge my signature. He chose to systematically steal from me while pretending to help me. Those were his decisions, not mine. Sometimes at night, I think about that 10-year-old boy who used to fall asleep on my couch watching baseball games. I think about teaching him to drive, helping him move into his college dorm, being there for his wedding. I think about all the moments when he was just my nephew, my brother's kid, someone I loved. And then I think about him sitting in that escrow office, looking at me with calculation in his eyes, trying to figure out how to talk his way out of what he'd done. Trying to use my love for him as a shield against consequences. That's the part that haunts me. Not that he stole from me, but that he thought he could. That he looked at me and saw a mark, not family. That somewhere along the way, I became nothing more than an opportunity to him. I still keep a photo of Marcus from when he was 12 on my desk. In it, he's wearing a Dodgers cap I bought him, holding a baseball glove I gave him for his birthday. He's smiling, gap-toothed, and innocent. Sometimes I look at that photo and wonder where that kid went. When did he stop being that kid? But I'm a detective. I know that people aren't static. They change, they make choices, they become who they decide to become. Marcus decided to become a thief. He decided to prey on me, and I decided to stop him. I'm 62 years old. I've got a few more years before I retire for real. I've solved a lot of cases in my career, put away a lot of bad people. But this case, the case against my own nephew, is the one that defined me, not because it was the most complex or the most serious, but because it tested what I believed about justice and family and whether those two things can coexist. I still believe in justice. I have to. If I stop believing that laws matter, that consequences matter, that we have to hold people accountable regardless of who they are, then what was the point of the last 28 years? But I also believe in family. I do, just not blind loyalty. Real family doesn't steal from you. Real family doesn't forge your signature and try to have you declared incompetent. Real family doesn't look at your trust as a vulnerability to exploit. I'd do it all again if I had to. Every investigation, every piece of evidence I gathered, every moment I sat across from Agent Chen going over the case file. Because the alternative would have been letting Marcus destroy everything I'd built, everything I'd worked for, and then potentially doing the same thing to someone else. You don't get to choose your family, but you do get to choose what you accept from them. And I chose not to accept being a victim. Some people think that's cold. They think I should have just confronted Marcus, given him a chance to stop, maybe work something out privately. But those people don't understand criminals. If I'd confronted him without evidence, he would have destroyed the evidence. If I'd given him a chance to stop, he would have just gotten better at hiding it. And if I'd tried to handle it privately, he would have played on my emotions, promised to make it right, and then done it again the moment I let my guard down. I've spent my entire adult life studying human behavior, particularly criminal behavior. I know how these things work. The only way to stop someone who's actively defrauding you is to build an ironclad case. and let the justice system handle it. Anything less just teaches them to be more careful next time. My nephew thought he could steal from me because I was old, because I trusted him, because I loved him. He thought those things made me weak, but he was wrong. Those things didn't make me weak. They made me careful. They made me thorough. They made me determined to do this right, by the book, in a way that would stand up to any scrutiny. And in the end, that's exactly what happened. Marcus is in prison, my properties are secure, the law was followed to the letter. Justice was served. But I still keep that photo of 12-year-old Marcus on my desk, because I need to remember that people are complicated, that you can love someone and still hold them accountable, that sometimes the hardest thing to do is also the right thing to do. I'm a detective. I catch criminals, even when those criminals are family, especially when those criminals are family. Because if I won't hold my own family accountable, how can I ask anyone else to do the same? That's my story. That's what happened when my nephew thought I was too old, too trusting, too out of it to notice what he was doing. He was wrong about all of that, and now he's got 7 years to think about just how wrong he was.